Welcome back. So now we have confirmation that the CYL4 units are in fact getting refined, alongside Legendary Julia, Sothis, and Har. Really good batch overall, but I can't say I'm not worried, especially for some of them, less so than others, mainly Brave Edelgard, but even with that being the case, we should be getting the refines in around 4 days. I believe it's on the 5th. So I figured something that could be absolutely fun, just for the hell of it, is come up with some potential refine ideas, as well as stuff I would like to see from these units, or just something interesting enough so not only are they unique in their own right, but they could still stand out. And for the most part, I find that these are generally going to be desirable effects that I believe will actually allow them to come back into the meta at the very least, which is what I'm really hoping for. So I guess you could call this a quote-unquote sequel to the last CYL4 video that I did maybe about 4 or 5 days ago. Even with that being the case, I wanted to just give general thoughts, refine effects that I think they probably need, but also stuff I would like to see. And I basically came up with 2 refine ideas for each of these units, and we'll basically go over them. And yeah, that's gonna pretty much be that. So with that out of the way, we may as well just get started. We'll start off with Brave Claude this time around, since last time we started with Brave Edelgard. We'll start with Brave Claude. Right now, his weapon's basically just slaying, healing on every special, and Spectrum 5. Really basic stuff. His stat line's pretty good, but given that he definitely relies on his healing gimmick to remain bulky, he will either need to have a suitable amount of firepower, or he'll need some defensive properties that will allow him to consistently trigger that special. So, in my mind, I figured one of the first things you could absolutely do with him is give him a tempo effect. As with the tempo effect in slaying, if the foe initiates combat on him, regardless of what skills they have, he'll always be able to retaliate with a special, which will allow him to keep his health active, which is going to be pretty important in my opinion for what he needs in his refine, at least if he wants to maintain this gimmick of healing. However, there's always that possibility that a unit will get one-shot, because 23-25 bulk, not including the Spectrum 5 he gets, isn't going to be enough nowadays to at least take a single hit. As such, I do think he also needs another defensive property in his weapon, and I think the best thing they could go down is the Miracle route, where if his HP is above 25% at the start of combat, and the foe would reduce it to 0, then he survives with 1 HP, which is what I hope he kind of gets. I'm more keen on the tempo effect mostly, so he can consistently get the healing from his weapon. However, one of the things he also has to pair it with is some sort of durability, whether that's just flat damage reduction or just Miracle. And I think Miracle might be the better clause, because it will at least make him Deadeye lethality proof. He will still go down to the likes of like Brave attacks or units with guaranteed follow-up, so it's not like the craziest. I think it would do pretty well. You could also give him like some sort of half no follow-up effect if you really want, which is what I did for the second refine idea. Actually, as I mentioned, I wrote 2 refine ideas that I would probably like to see. His is a lot more basic in my opinion, but I think it's stuff he just needs so he can actually function in his role. So swapping out the Miracle effect, he has a half no follow-up effect that basically just prevents any sort of guaranteed follow-up attack from the foe, meaning that he could continually speed stack if he needs to, and if he's fast enough, he's only going to be taking 1 hit. So rather than getting the Miracle, he will just get flat 40% damage reduction instead, which will help out with his survivability a lot more. This is akin to the likes of Guard Bearing, which he can't get, but this works on pretty much every combat. I assume they would lock it behind some sort of conditional, obviously, like units HP 25% or initiates combat and within 2 spaces. Whatever the case may be, I find that he just needs 2 specific effects. One absolutely being the half tempo effect that just neutralizes any guard effects, but he also needs damage reduction of any sort. And whether you just trade that for Miracle or a half no follow-up, I personally like this one more, because at the very least he is fast, so if he does have to take a hit, whether that chips him down to a significant amount, he can at least prevent any sort of follow-up if he is fast enough, which he should be able to be. And yeah, that's kind of what I really want to see out of Win Parthia. Next we have Brave Dimitri, who definitely needs the most work in terms of a refine. He only has distant counter with the Mistletoe effect, basically just grants accelerated cooldown on every foe's attack, so there's something that needs to be done there. He can't really act as a notable Omni-Tank nowadays, mainly because of the fact that mages just hit way too hard, and even though with 40% damage reduction based on his defense, he only has 19 res, so any notable mage is going to shred him. Even then, he still has a really good stat spread. Otherwise, 40 attack, 36 speed, 40 defense is really, really good. And honestly, there's only one thing I just want out of this refine, and I think it would absolutely make him amazing. And that is, foes' attacks calculate damage using the higher of units' defense or res. That's all I want. And that may be asking for a lot, like a lot. That's basically increasing his res to match his defense. So if he stacks his defense like by 20, 30 points, then he's going to have that much for res as well, meaning that he's going to be obnoxiously difficult to take down. I think the idea is that you lock it behind an HP condition, which may sound really dumb in hindsight because 25% is like super free. But it wouldn't make him area of effect proof, meaning that if there was an area of effect mage that hit him, then it would still shred through his HP, and then they would still be targeting his res, which is why I do think they need to add some sort of conditional there, but this is the effect I want to see. Of course, you also have the obligatory Spectrum 5, which pretty much comes standard with most weapons nowadays. And I think they should also upgrade the Mistletoe effect to Breath. I don't see the issue really with just upgrading it, especially if the idea is to consistently get healing back. So even if there are guard effects, he doesn't have tempo in his kit. So with the breath effect, he'll still be able to trigger noontime on every second hit, which I think is pretty good. Of course, if they want to go a bit more quote-unquote tame, they can switch out the higher of the defense res thing with true damage based on his defense and damage reduction based on his defense. So akin to the likes of Asker and Spring Maria, where at the very least this will allow him to act more as a suitable Omni tank if they want to keep him in that role, which I imagine they will. I don't think they're going to pull Leo and just remove his base effect and just give him something else, but I think it would be funny if they did. Nevertheless, I still think they may as well just keep the same breath effect, Spectrum 5, and really they could go either way. This is definitely a much more tame route because having foes target the unit's defense all the time would be really, really dumb. But nevertheless, I think some sort of ability to increase his overall longevity on the field is what he really needs, especially if they do want to keep him as an Omni tank, because even with 40% damage reduction from his B slot, 19 res with any mage that could just double him is going to shred him, which is why I do think he needs more survivability. Then we have Brave Edelgard, who in my opinion doesn't even need a refine, not because her weapon is outdated, no, it's because she has Stout Axe, dude. Stout Axe granting 50% damage reduction if the foe can follow up, which they will be able to because she only has 16 speed, and combine that with her 43 defense and 35 res and Black Eagle rule, she's basically Armor Brave Ike, which is really, really dumb, but nevertheless, there are things I would like to see in her weapon, especially since she's getting refined. If they're gonna refine the weapon, then they need to make it more justifiable to use over Stout Axe in my opinion. So naturally, they should just add damage reduction to the first hit. You're essentially keeping the base effects that she already comes with. It doesn't really need to be changed per se, but to compensate for that, you're basically adding Valentine Gustav's or Pirate Surtur's effect into it. So if the foe can make a follow-up attack, she inflicts another -6 attack and defense on the foe during combat, and it reduces the foe's first attack by 40%. So it would mean that you don't have to use Stout Axe, you could still use Flower Heartclare, and you'd still get more stats out of it. Which is why I do think they need to do something akin to that, because right now Stout Axe just absolutely blows it out of the water. Because right now Stout Axe is just a much better weapon, especially even if you lose out on double bonfires with Steady Breath during combat, you're still getting a ridiculous amount of damage reduction every hit in the enemy phase, which is why they need to add it to her kit. However, if they don't want to do that, I think there's a better thing they can do. And before you guys go commenting in the comment section about how this is going to be stupid, hear me out. Make it a player phase refine. I know that may sound stupid because she has Black Eagle rule, which grants her damage reduction on every foe's second attack in the enemy phase. However, it does grant a guaranteed follow-up in both phases. So, my idea is you not only give her Gale Force, but you also give her Fire Sweep. Not full Fire Sweep in the sense that if the foe attacks then she can't counter, but just player phase Fire Sweep. And the only reason that I say this is so that it synergizes with her initial base effect of not only being able to move one extra space, but the order status that she gets from it. Because otherwise it's just going to become extremely useless. Either one of these approaches will absolutely make it worthwhile. However, if you do want to prioritize enemy phase, she will absolutely need damage reduction. That being said, I do think having some sort of player phase niche alongside Black Eagle Rule would actually be really, really cool. But I think it would at least allow her to stand out comparatively to a lot of other armors in the game, which is why I gave her this. Okay, now you could go and type how dumb it is in the comment section. Go ahead, whatever. I'm just gonna move on to Lysithea. Lysithea, who probably needs the least amount of effects to get her going, but there are some things I would also like to see from her. Nevertheless, she has a guaranteed follow-up and a pseudo-desperation effect if she initiates combat while her HP is below 100%, and she gets additional attack and speed if the foe's HP is above 75%. She also has cavalry effectiveness, which is kind of a meme, mainly because cavalry aren't really known for taking hits, but even then, it's still nice. She has no sense of bulk. She's pretty much just all offense, which is why we're not going to even bother with any sort of enemy phase presence. I know one of the things most people clamored to was the idea that she basically just chips herself at the start of combat for her refine, which, to be fair, I do have for the second refine, but I figured what we could do instead is also make it a speed check. So rather than having her HP be below 100%, she could also make a speed check against certain foes, and if she's faster, then she gets the desperation effect and the guaranteed follow-up, which is what I put for the first one. After that point, I also gave her a refine for another speed check, basically grants her Flashing Blade and another 6 attack and speed. And then with the advent rise of Deflect Magic, which is pretty much everywhere with Hardy Fighter, mainly because right now there aren't any specials that pierce through any sort of damage reduction, on top of the fact that just there's so many prevalent mages right now, is definitely one of those more coveted skills to have around. As such, I figured you could give her the Deadeye effect, which may seem a bit overpowered. I don't know per se. She does have Flashing Blade without any sort of slaying effect, meaning that you could still inflict guard on her so she doesn't trigger it, but if she has Time's Pulse, then that's a whole different story. But even with that being the case, I don't think this would be the worst, especially for a player phase nuke like her. I think she needs something along those lines if she does want to compete, because at the very best, she'd just be another like Ninja Korin or Summer Micaiah, because basically they'd both be striking twice. However, hers could also get shut down by the likes of Hardy Fighter and Brave Hector and yada yada, but Brave Hector's just a really bad matchup regardless. So I figured giving her some sort of niche that would allow her to bypass stuff like Deflect Magic would definitely be the way to go. However, if that seems a bit too much, here's more text. So rather than having the speed check, which I think is a better approach, they could always just give her 1 damage at the start of combat if her HP is 100%. I don't think that's really like outlandish at all, especially if the goal is to just get the base effect going. I don't think it's really the most outlandish thing they can give her. However, the other thing that comes into mind is the second effects that I gave her, or I guess second, third, fourth. Basically, she would still also get attack speed +6, so her offensive prowess is still pretty good. But I also gave her the tempo effect, so that she could consistently trigger specials if she is able to double, which she'll more than likely be able to in most cases, because guaranteed follow-up plus a lot of speed, pretty good combination. So that way she could also run stuff like Flashing Blade, and then trigger 2 cooldown special, especially if they want to make up for the fact that she doesn't have slaying. I don't think it's a bad idea whatsoever. And some sort of null follow-up effect that basically allows her to get her guaranteed follow-up. So it's a failsafe that she's able to double regardless. That may make the guaranteed follow-up effect a bit redundant, but it's more akin to the likes of Seliph and Coral Saber and all those units with guaranteed follow-ups with half null follow-up effects. I think she would need something along those lines, especially if you were to go up against not only like specific armors with Hardy Fighter and all that jazz, but also it wouldn't necessarily be the most overpowered in my opinion, mainly because there's no follow-up like everywhere in the game. So at the very worst, she could still make a speed check if the guarantee follow-up does get shut off. And with this, she doesn't have to necessarily run no follow-up in her B slot. She can still keep her innate low speed res. So I think this is probably a good approach. But yeah, in terms of just overall effects, she just needs something that can allow her to trigger her main effect consistently. So whether it's a speed check or damage to unit at the start of the turn, whatever, and then you give her some extra stuff. And yeah, these are the things I think all these Brave units really need if they just want to start standing out and if they really want to compete nowadays. You know, going into this, I thought I'd have the most fun making Brave Dimitri's refine. However, given that it's a DC refine, you can only get like 1 or 2 effects at most. So as I was working on Brave Edelgard's refine, I realized that the player phase one that I gave her for her second refine is probably my favorite one, mainly because of just how cool it is in my opinion. However, we'll find out what these refines are in a few days, and hopefully all of them will get something good. But you'll have to let me know what you think down below. What do you really want to see out of all these refines? Do you want Brave Dimitri to finally get his justice? Do you want Brave Edelgard to get nothing good or something good? I don't know. I'm not trying to start a fandom war with that. But let's be real. Out of all of them right now, Brave Edelgard is doing really, really well. So maybe a tame refine wouldn't be the worst. But again, you'll have to let me know what you think down below. Anyway, if you want to see more videos like this, make sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you later.